This is Monday.
I didn't hear you say much about politics.
Well,
Or maybe I just
I was-
didn't
I
take it
was-
that way.
I talked about how our politicians are largely untrustworthy, and there's definitely some
So then I guess we're
ideologies on one side of the political aisle that I was not too friendly toward. So anyway, so this is Monday, May the 16th. This is our second meeting of the study on the book Good Grief. And last time we covered, I think, just the introduction. So tonight we're going to start with stage 1 and see if we can cover stage 2. They're short chapters, but there's a lot there. So let's begin with just a short word of prayer. The Lord be with you.
So with you.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, this chance to gather together and to talk about some of those things that are sometimes hard to talk about. We thank you for the guidance of Dr. Westberg and his wisdom that's been shared so far and wide throughout our church and other churches. Please guide our discussion tonight, that it would be fruitful, but also that it would be pleasing to you. And help all that we do and say be focused upon you and upon your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. All right, so the intro was mostly just the genesis of how he came to write this book, but there was, I think, some good revelation in there about how we think about loss and the different ways we react to loss and how we grieve. So he is calling stage 1 shock. So he introduces it with Psalm 3, verses 3 and 4. But you, O Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, and the one who lifts up my head. I cry aloud to the Lord, and he answers me from his holy hill. As you're reading this book, I hope you're taking note of those little verses that he puts in the front of the chapter. I think they're sometimes just incredibly appropriate. I'll say it that way. All right, so he begins by saying, God has so made us that we can somehow bear pain and sorrow and even tragedy. He's made us so we can bear it. I don't know. I still think about that sentence when I read it, because depending on the nature of the tragedy, sometimes it just seems unbearable. We just had my kids. We decided we wanted them to watch Saving Private Ryan. And I haven't watched it since it came out. And I happened to be in Germany when it came out. I wasn't far from where a lot of this stuff happened. And I remember watching that movie and watching that, have you all seen this movie? Do you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Saving Private Ryan. Have you seen it, Diane? No. Okay. It was, I'll put it this way, it was so realistic that the Department of Veteran Affairs had to set up a crisis line for World War II veterans, because it took them right back to D-Day. Okay. The gist of if you don't mind me telling you, the gist of the story is the movie starts out with, well, not the very beginning, but it's the D-Day scene, and these soldiers are all cramped into these little landing ships, right? And the ramp comes down, and boom, and the first one gets shot right in the middle of the forehead, and blood goes splattering all over the guy next to him. I mean, it's gory. It's really gory, but from what I hear, it's very realistic, right? So it's showing all this gore and this death and these people that they're just trying to get on the beach, and the Germans are just picking them off. And then they cut away to a scene where you've got this room full of secretaries, and they're typing letters. And these letters they're typing are, Dear Mrs. Johnson, we are very sorry to inform you that your son, Joe, has been killed in action. He was a credit to his country, but they're basically form letters, and everyone said the same thing. Well, they all have to be reviewed, and at some point, somebody, and I don't remember who it was, happened to notice that 2 of these letters were going to the same person. And eventually it came to be 4 letters, all going to one house. 4 brothers all got killed. And there was a 5th brother still out in the field. And their last name was Ryan. So the 4-star gets involved, like the very top of the food chain, and he said, go get that boy and get him home, right? And so Tom Hanks's character is tasked with bringing him home, and that's what the rest of the movie's about. And it's just a gripping movie emotionally from beginning to end. I mean, just gut-wrenching. But watching that woman, when she sees the car pull in the driveway with the green military vehicle with the big white star, and the officer gets out, and the priest is with him, and you see that, you know exactly what's about to happen. And then she finds out 4 of her 5 sons are now dead. Yeah. So, and that's just, I mean, sure, it's a fictional example, but
But it was true.
Yeah.
I mean, some
Yeah.
people, I'm not saying that one was true, but
Yeah.
some people did lose as many as 3 or 4
Yeah.
in their family.
Yeah. But anyway, to the book's point, that God has made us that we can somehow bear pain and sorrow and tragedy. And I think what his point there must be, I think what it has to be, is that we'll find a way somehow, each one of us. Some of us, and we react differently, right? Some people will just retreat into themselves and just isolate. Other people will want to wail and cry and scream and get it out, and and those aren't the only 2 options, right? But there's different ways that we handle it. When the sorrow is overwhelming, we're sometimes temporarily anesthetized. It makes us numb. Sometimes we just have to do that. It keeps us from having to face the grim reality all at once. And this is this shock. If you have any medical training at all, if you experience some kind of a really traumatic physical damage to your body, a lot of times your body will just cut the pain off initially. You can't feel anything. Have y'all seen this scar on my nose? Mm-hmm. Have you ever noticed that? Yeah. There's a scar that goes through my eyebrow, across the bridge of my nose, and around my nostril. When I was 18, I fell through a ceiling like this, and I ended up, my nose was torn all the way through here and all the way through my septum, and I laid on the emergency room table, and the doctor took the tip of my nose and flopped it back and forth. Oh, you did a good job. I'm like, really? Can you just put it back on, please? But I didn't feel anything, because everything was just really traumatic. It was that initial shock. And this happens to us emotionally too. And it can last up to weeks. But I think the key here, and I hope I have the awareness as we go through this to point out things like this, that there are times when we need to go get professional help. And if this numbness lasts more than a week or 2, it's time to talk to a professional. But that doesn't mean we need to be afraid of it. It often hits us, and we shouldn't be afraid if we are numb, and we shouldn't be afraid if we don't experience this. It is something that often happens, not always. This example they give, sometimes at the funeral home, we see the sorrowing wife and find she's almost radiant, greeting people who come to offer their sympathy. And the onlookers will say, wow, her faith is amazing. It's probably not faith. It's probably numbness. Mm-hmm. It's probably... And that's the thing. We tend to equate faith with a stoical attitude and not with tears. That's not how faith addresses grief, is the point. Shock may just be, I like this thing that he pointed out here, the shock may help us deal with life until we're ready to move to the next stage of grief. Says the pastor may encourage the grieving person to break down and express emotions they couldn't let out during the shock stage. In every funeral that I've done so far, I have tried to say either in the homily that I've done or privately to the family or both, let it happen, right? Number one, don't feel guilty about any emotion you're feeling, whether it's sadness or anger or whatever. Feel it. Let it happen. I am of the belief that the emotions that hit us when something significant happens to us, the emotions that come our way are not something we choose. Our choice is how we react to those emotions and how we react to them and how we act on them. That's where we have the choice. Some people deal with that better than others. Me personally, I might not say anything and I might not do anything necessarily, but from a very early age, it's always been written all over my face. I can't hide my emotions at all. But I also know that, if I know how I deal with emotion, I know how I will handle it. I think, though, in grief, the magnitude of the emotion and the combination of emotions, probably, because it's probably not just one. It's probably a mixture of emotions. And they probably are overwhelming for most people, especially when you're dealing with a really significant loss. I'm on page 14. The minister, seeing this woman in what appears to be shock, will arrange to visit her after the funeral, knowing that eventually that strong exterior that she's putting on right now will eventually break down. I don't know what all of your family history is, and I come from a Swedish tradition, and and I don't necessarily blame my parents, because it was their parents and all their siblings and everybody else. If you're having some kind of a negative emotional event in your life, you go in your bedroom and close the door. We don't want to see that. We don't want to see that stuff. So it was always private. Pass that to me, please. And I mean, obviously that's a cultural thing. I think this church is a German history, right? Mm-hmm. Germans aren't that different when it comes to showing emotion out in public. So shock, then, this shock stage is a temporary escape from reality. The temporariness of it is okay. Being in it is temporary, it's good. Staying in it too long is where it's unhealthy. First time we met, I hope you heard me say, there's no right way to grieve. I think the only wrong way to grieve is to be stuck in it. And I think I got this from him. Okay, if you're stuck in any one stage for too long, and you may not know on your own what too long is, that's where you need to rely on family and friends to say, hey, can we help? Hey, have you talked to somebody? You really, well, you get the point. So it might not be the kind of thing that either you can notice by yourself, or that you would notice by yourself. You probably need to rely on the people in your innermost circles to offer you insight into whether you're in one stage of grief too long. All right. And then he moves into this is one reason it's good to keep busy. Now, can I put you on the spot, Priscilla?
Mm-hmm.
What did I tell you after the funeral? Go home and let these people take care of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you probably had no desire to do that, did you? You probably wanted to do something.
Oh, did I do something?
Yeah.
I've always, well, I did do something. I started cleaning. I've always done
Yeah.
that if I've been upset or something.
Yeah.
But we had a yard sale Saturday, and kids would come up and say, "Mom, why do you have this out here?" And I said, "I don't know. I didn't put it out there, but I just went through this thing. Everything got just."
Just cleaning.
Nothing
Yeah.
matters. Let's
Yeah.
get rid of the clutter.
And, yeah, so I don't know what stage that was.
There was probably a little bit of shock at play there, but
anyway.
yeah. I mean, but I would have only said that to you for that day. I just wanted you, because that was such an emotional day.
It was.
And rightfully so. But being busy it can be healthy as long as you're not using it to displace your grief. You know, if it's just a way to help you mentally deal with life.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So the first thing he says is carry on as much of your routine as possible. If you get up for breakfast at 8 o'clock, get up for breakfast at 8 o'clock. You know, do those things through the day that show you. It's gonna make you realize that there are days ahead of you, right?
But that's hard.
Yes, it is.
I mean,
It is.
to have the same routine because you're under stress or
Well,
whatever it is, and you
yeah.
don't want to get up at 8 o'clock.
Well, and if you're used to getting up at 8 o'clock to have breakfast with your husband, your routine is already changed.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
there is something that is absolutely different about that. Let's see. All right. It's good for us to keep fairly busy and continue to carry on as much of our usual activities as possible during the period of crisis. It's not good to have someone take over completely for us at such a time and make all our decisions for us. You can, I think, see where there would be an unhealthy codependency that would develop, right? Your brain needs to work through things. And I think that's what he's offering to us here. Well-meaning relatives might hinder the grief process by forcing us to sit inactive and just observe. That's not good. And I like this. I like the surgery patients analogy. Used to be after surgery, they just made you just lay still and not do anything and not move. And they found out that was not good for the surgical patient's recovery. They wanted them to actually get up and move. Who was it? I'm trying to think of the last person I know that had a knee replacement surgery. They had him walking later, like later that day.
Yeah.
You know, that just blows my mind. Same day. Yeah. So the sooner a grieving person has to deal with immediate problems and make decisions, the better. And I think what he's getting at there is that, you know, the decision of, all right, do I have wheat toast or cinnamon toast this morning? You know, that's not a monumental decision. You know, it's not going to make or break you one way or the other, but it's a decision your brain has to make. You know, am I going to have oatmeal or Cheerios? Am I going to, you know, whatever. These little things are going to help your brain keep moving. So if we are not the grieving person, but we are in their circle, how do we not hinder their grief process? So you make yourself available. You be near them. Now this is where you have to know the person enough. You have to have a relationship with them enough to know what that means. There are some people who, if you are just around them, they will say, you know, thank you for being here. Could you help me mow my lawn? I can't do it, and I could use some help. There are other people that will not ask no matter how much they need, and you have to be a little aggressive. You have to just make dinner for them and take it to them and say, hey, I know you got a lot going on right now. Here's a little casserole. I hope it helps you. Enjoy. You know, You don't even ask. You do it. But you have to know the person well enough to know if that's the route you need to take with them. So they had this little story with the sorority house. The mother of a large sorority house at Midwestern University says of her experiences with girls who receive bad news from home. I always make it a point to be there near the girl the whole time she's making phone calls and preparing to leave. I always keep her as busy as I can, letting her do her own packing, making her own minute-to-minute decisions. The other girls in the house always want to wait on her hand and foot, but I've learned this is the worst thing you can do for a person at such a time. I'm a little hesitant about blanket statements like that. I think it depends on the person, but because I was in Colorado when my dad died, and I got the phone call at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was already in my uniform for the day, and I was told to report into my commander, so I was trying to keep my bearing. Well, my mother had just told me this, right? And I was like, how am I going to get home? What am I going to do? You know. So I go in there, and this is right at the beginning of my senior year, and I go into his office, and I report it in, and he starts asking me questions. And I don't know what was, I really don't remember the details, but I remember at one point he said, "Okay, Cook, what's wrong with you?" "Sir, I just got a phone call. My dad died." And he just totally took over. And I needed that at that point, because I was just, well, I mean, it was all this stuff hit me all at once, and I was trying to bury it because I was in uniform and trying to keep my military bearing and not show emotion and all the stuff you're not supposed to do. And so this is an exception to this, okay? I'm telling you, he took over, and he made arrangements for my flight, and, and all that stuff. A lot of it, I think, is situational, but all right. Normally, we shouldn't take away from the grieving person the therapeutic value of doing everything he or she can for him or herself. There is a therapeutic value in that person being self-sufficient in certain things. This is what will help a person come out of their trance and get on with the grief work. It's work. Even though they do come out of the initial shock, they will undoubtedly experience times in the later days and months when the unreality of the loss comes over them again. So this is one of those times where, as he says, you'll go through this stage for a while, and you'll come out of that stage, and you might come back into that stage again. It might just happen. Have you all experienced that? Or you lost somebody, and 6 months later, I just can't believe they're gone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A year or two later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just,
Well, I wish you could call her up and ask her such and such or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, I do that a lot.
So the last sentence in this chapter, well, the top of page 16, I just can't believe it has happened. And intellectually, I know it did, but I guess I have not really accepted it emotionally. Nobody ever taught me how to do that. I don't know how to force myself to accept something emotionally. I guess you just tell yourself over and over again intellectually until your emotions buy it. I don't know. This is one I know. I understand the sentence. I don't think. I guess for me, I can't make that happen. It just has to happen whenever it's going to happen. Is that how you all?
That's how I
Yeah.
find it.
yeah.
I think the
The
more
emotion.
reality things that
Mhm.
you go through, it seems to it just kind of chips away at, okay, here's one more thing telling me that it is real, one more thing that's telling me it's real, one more thing,
Yeah.
and it may take, but you're not, I'm like you, I don't know how you force yourself, but I think kind of it just,
And maybe you just can't.
you,
I don't
you
know.
can't, but I don't think you can force yourself to accept it.
It takes a long time.
It does. It does. It takes a little while.
How long is a little while?
Is it this much?
It's 2.
Too.
It's 2. I went back and watched that again. The biggest hurdle is accepting it emotionally. We don't want to believe it, so unconsciously we set as many barriers in the way as possible, making complete acceptance a very slow process. So, and we do that unconsciously. It's not a decision. All right. So every chapter, if you haven't noticed yet, and I hope you looked at these, has a list of questions that wants us to kind of ponder. Although you want to avoid making major decisions, what decisions are you able to make that could restore a sense of reality?
Well, those are those routine
Yeah,
things.
the little things, I think. In the midst of loss, it may seem everything has been uprooted. What are the anchors you're able to take hold of now?
I don't understand that question.
What
What's an anchor? What?
something to hold you to what's real? Because John's death might seem like it's unreal. So what holds you in place? What grounds you in your time of grief?
Other family members.
Family.
Friends.
Friends. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Your
I
church
agree.
family.
Too.
Hmm?
Faith.
Faith.
Church family faith.
Yeah. Are you able to identify the barriers that keep you in a state of disbelief?
I don't know, I think everybody goes through when you wake up in the morning and you don't think it's real till it's real.
Yeah.
Till you're really awake.
Till you're really awake. I mean, it's just that kind of wherever you are when you first wake up that, oh
Yeah.
no, this is not real, but it is.
Yeah. Yes, for me, my dad was the first death that I really had to process. The other deaths that I had in my life were grandparents that happened when I was much, much younger, or I wasn't close to. I mean, the first death I ever cried over was my dog. And that was different, I guess. But it was still grief. But
Still grief.
yeah,
Oh,
but it
it
was,
is.
yeah, it was. I don't know. I didn't even really know what death was at that point. I just knew I didn't have my dog anymore. I love my dog. I'm just saying this out loud because I'm trying to remember what the barriers were. Because for me, when my dad died, my barriers were I was just totally removed geographically from it. I came home, we did the funeral.
And went back.
Yeah. Well, and for the funeral, I put on my uniform, and my uniform was like an emotional suit of armor. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
No,
It
doesn't.
I was, because I'm the firstborn son, and what's the job of the firstborn son? Well, I'm now the man of the house. Dad died, so I have to be strong for mom and my brother, and so I had to. I didn't let myself cry. I didn't let myself grieve for like 10 years. So don't think I don't realize the hypocrisy of me leading a study about grief when I have done it so poorly in my life.
Sometimes you don't though, because especially in my situation,
everyone in my family that I've lost is because there was something wrong
Mm-hmm.
and there was suffering.
Yeah.
So I didn't like to see them go,
Yeah.
but I knew it was better for them.
Because you grieved up until their death.
Mm-hmm.
Your first stages were starting while they were still alive, right?
Yeah.
Um,
But then, 4, 5, 6 years later, it hit me.
yeah. Yeah.
Like Christmas here, when when y'all did Christmas again,
Mm-hmm.
over in the fair shop.
Yeah.
Do you think part of your barrier for the 10 years or so was partly due to the fact that you were military?
Oh,
and
sure.
that you were
Absolutely.
in that
Well-
type of mindset,
Yeah.
I guess.
Keep your bearing.
Yes,
you know.
yeah.
Mhm.
That was definitely part of it.
Yeah.
The other part
Sure.
was the geographic separation. I didn't see my mom every day.
Right.
I didn't see my
Yeah,
house,
right.
or dad's
Yeah.
truck or whatever. So it was the kind of thing that I would grieve in little pieces here and there when I'd go home. First Christmas was hard. He died in September, and I went back for Christmas. That was hard. There was a lot of grieving that went on there. That's probably the most timely and healthy grieving I did in the wake of his death. But
So yours is more of smaller doses of grieving circumstances as opposed to overdosing on it.
right.
You know.
I don't remember if I used this analogy with you all. I've told other people the way I described my grief was like the main character in Shawshank Redemption, how he dug a tunnel over 10 years and he just did it a spoonful at a time, and he'd take it out, like he'd hide it in his pants pockets and then take it out and shake it out in the work yard during the day, just a spoonful at a time. That's how I grieved, really, at least for my dad. So if, those are the only barriers that I can really put my finger on in my grief. So I'm trying to think about knowing now, if I had known then what I know now, how would I address those barriers? And probably the other barrier was the family culture of, you do that negative emotion stuff in private, we don't want to see it. That's probably the first thing I would have to address. This barrier is learning how to share negative emotion with somebody else who is close to me. Because we want our friends and our family to see our best, right? That's not unnatural, but it's also not just what friends and family are supposed to be for. Even church family, right? I think it's one of the things about our culture as a church. And I don't mean Miller's, I mean America wide. We put on our Sunday best, right? And when we can't or we don't, we stay home. Especially when it comes to my brain always takes me to dementia. People in early stages of dementia are often, there's nothing physically wrong with them, at least by appearance sake, but a lot of times there'll be little behavioral things that either they themselves are just enough aware of that they know they don't want to be around other people, or their family is aware of it. Someone who's always been quiet and polite their whole life all of a sudden will develop a sailor's vocabulary, almost not like Tourette's, but just a change in how they communicate, and it to the family it can be very embarrassing. And so what do? They retreat. We're a hospital. We're supposed to be a hospital, not a museum. Yes, I like the concept of putting on my best clothes for God, who created me and saved me and all that, but we gotta be able to support each other in our times of need. We should think of when we when we are grieving and we are sad and we're in this state that I don't know how I'm going to get through this. We should be thinking about, my friends in church, right? I mean, I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to. Priscilla, I'm so thankful that you're here. That you're in church every Sunday, that you've been coming to Bible study. That to me shows that you trust us with your grief. That fills my heart. That shows me where your faith is, and that shows me that the people around you have showed you that they are willing to,
Yes.
Not just willing to, but eager to support you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Okay, so there's stage 1. Did I go over anything too quickly? Did anybody else think of anything that you want to stay on for a minute, or do you want to go into stage 2?
I think a lot of people are, you were talking about the barriers as far as, I think about ones where they tell people, you hear stories of people where the rooms never change and it's been 15,
Oh.
20, 30, whatever,
Yeah.
however many years.
Yeah.
I mean,
We talked about that in the introduction.
Yeah, I did meet somebody like that once, and that was nobody in their circle knew how to help him address it. It was just, and I didn't know. They just told me about it. I didn't know the guy, but yeah.
and you don't know how to approach someone there. I mean, depending on how well you know them. I mean, because it goes back to you can't tell somebody how to grieve, and I mean that
Yeah.
may be what you get when you say, "Can I help you redesign over your?" Or even
When they get angry.
Or could we take a few
Yeah,
things,
they
or
get
even
upset.
saying something, or
Yeah.
do you think somebody else in the family might like to have, a few of these or one or two of these things to remember,
Yeah.
Whoever it is.
Yeah.
But that's a delicate thing.
That
Yeah.
is.
Because
It would be very situational.
Yeah.
Well, then let's talk about stage 2, expressing emotion. So this one he uses Psalm 13. How are we doing on time? Yeah, good. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? Oof. All right. Emotional release comes at about the time it begins to dawn on us how dreadful the loss is. So you're coming out of the shock stage and you're realizing just what you've lost. Sometimes without warning, it wells up inside an uncontrollable urge to express it. And that's exactly what we ought to do. Allow ourselves to express the emotions we actually feel. And I love that sentence. We've been given tear glands. We're supposed to use them when we have good reason to use them. We're supposed to use them. I don't know that, I think this next part, I think, is where this book is going to start showing its age. So the original editions were copyrighted in 1962 and 1971. Now, this one was printed in 2019, but this next part about this is very traditional male role kind of stuff. Now, I don't think anybody in this room has a problem with it. I don't know that the rest of society would see it this way, but we've taught boys not to cry. I was certainly taught that. I'm guilty of teaching my own kids that. Not quite to the extent that I think my dad did with me, but Wendy's brother-in-law taught his son, and then when we're with them on a holiday, if it comes up, he uses the same logic, and I've kind of adopted it as no blood, no tears, right? We're talking about physical injury, though. Just toughen up a little bit. You're a boy.
Shake it off.
Yeah.
Keep going.
When the boy is 8 and hurts himself, he does not dare cry, nor at 18 when something happens about which he ought to cry. Okay. You break your arm, I would expect you to cry. You break your leg, I don't care how old you are, I would expect you to cry. What's the level of pain? But
Sometimes men won't let themselves cry, and
that's right.
then when they do break down, their family is astounded.
Yeah. It's a scene our culture is not used to. We see it as weakness. That's that next. At 38, when some great loss is suffered, he can't cry. Right, I'm at the top of page 22. Men think not only is it a sign of weakness, but letting themselves go emotionally might lead to a nervous breakdown. If you don't keep it under control, you might not be able to get it back under control. If you let the beast out, you might not be able to get it back in the box. I can definitely relate to that sentiment. Not just with sadness, with other emotions too. But if you how does he put it? Men, this idea that of what men think about crying, that it's weak, might lead to nervous breakdown, has been disproven, but men seem not to understand it is the person who holds himself tense and refuses to let go, who may be in for trouble. There is a member of my family who, he's quite a bit older than me, but for years I was told that, oh yeah, he just keeps it all inside. And for that reason, he is always in the doctor's office dealing with ulcers and all these other things, that these emotions will somehow manifest themselves medically because he's not expressing anger, sadness. He just keeps it all bottled inside. But all through the scriptures, and I'm intrigued that he didn't give us any references here. The scriptures clearly show that when great calamities came to the hardy men of faith, they wept bitterly. Their tears were with them all the night long. And even Jesus wept, right? I mean, these are supposed to be our...
David did too, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And is it Jeremiah that's the crying?
The weeping prophet, yeah. Oh my gosh, that poor guy. Anytime you saw, if you see in the Old Testament a passage where it says, and they tore their clothes, they were probably crying too. That was maybe a way to show strength as they were showing their tears, I guess. I don't know. So then he switches gears a little bit. We speak about emotional release. It reminds us of the whole subject of emotions and our faith. Are we saying that religion should advocate emotionalism? Right? I had to look up that word. Have you all ever, you know what emotionalism is? It's I don't think he's talking, there's actually a religious practice called religious emotionalism. I don't think that, I think what he's just talking about is reacting to everything hyper emotionally. Okay, I put a little definition there. Excessively emotional character, excessive appeal to emotions, a tendency to respond with undue emotion. Okay, and he's saying, as people of faith, that's not where we look. That's not what we're going to practice. We're not going to encourage that or advocate that, but we're also not going to advocate for faith without emotion, right? Because emotion is essential to who we are as a person, and to try to repress it would make you less than a person. Emotions are part of us, not just the positive ones. What would sunshine be if we didn't have rain every now and then to appreciate it? Trying to imagine we can live fully and deeply without emotion is pretty ridiculous. Do you know anybody who takes, and I can say this because, like, my mom used to take some. My dad was on Prozac, Xanax, any of these medicines that there's no valleys. You never have any deep lows, but you never have any high highs either. You're just kind of cruising. Mom's told me that she just had to stop taking them, or she would, like cut the pill in half, or because she wasn't feeling anything. Can you imagine what that must be like? I mean,
They give them to you when you're depressed. That's why that stage 3, I never mind. We'll get to it.
yeah, okay.
But yeah, you take those when you're depressed.
Emotion is part of our being, and burying it and not expressing it is not what God wants for us. Nobody wants to cry. I really don't think anybody really wants to be angry. But
it's there.
it's there. And
And it
how could
comes
you,
out sometimes.
how could you give those up and not also have to, and if you knew also you had to give up joy and happiness and smiling and laughter? I wouldn't want to give those up. One of the great faults of intellectual Protestantism is that it has tended to stifle emotion. The Sunday services more resembled a lecture series than a worship experience. Yeah, that kind of hit me in the chest. Sorry, y'all. We must not and need not apologize for emotion in our religious experience, nor need we apologize for it in our grief. Does worship move you emotionally ever?
Sure.
Yeah.
The hymns,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, sometimes it does.
yeah, of course.
It puts you to thinking about things too. that-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
If you can stay awake. I was speaking from experience.
Yeah. Prior experience, right, Don?
True, true.
I mean, how great their art is,
Oh,
that's always,
yeah.
Silent
Give you
night gets
chills.
me every
Springs.
Christmas Eve.
so,
Yeah.
Always has.
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there's certain things.
I think a
The
lot of
music.
people too, songs that are sung at the funeral for whoever it was.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
what I
it's
said
just
about
Yep.
how
part of
great
it.
that art is.
Even if it's not there,
big one.
that it was, it's just,
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
or a song that
Yeah.
brings back, somebody taught you that song or
Yeah.
whatever the memory is with that song.
Yeah, they played, and I done forgot it, my brain doesn't work. John's song, that next Sunday. What,
Is that I, the Lord of Sea and Sky? Is
no.
it that one?
uh-uh.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, and I
don't
can't
remember what
even
the song
remember it
was.
now. But anyway, and so
Yeah.
I just, it was during communion, and so up the
Yeah.
aisle I come,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so, well, I went to Walmart today and walked by the men's department, and I couldn't help it. I just busted out crying, because I always used to buy John something.
Yeah.
When I do.
Yeah.
So that's my emotion.
No, you're
Well,
fine.
that's fine to do.
Absolutely.
And we need to give each other permission, I think. You know, I think we need to just, if we're going to change the culture of, you know, all right, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say I feel comfortable speaking for all of you, that I would be willing to bet each and every one of you here at this table would say, Priscilla, we don't mind you showing your emotion, right? In fact,
Well, thank you.
you know,
'cause
and I bet everybody else in the
I
church
can
is
hold back.
right. But somehow we have that culture where you have, I mean, just in what you've just said, you have a sense of guilt or shame or something, and you know, well, I shouldn't have done that, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
And that's not your fault. I'm not criticizing you. I'm criticizing
no,
our
I
culture.
understand. But I wish I could not do that.
Is it because
But
you've
it's hard not to
Yeah.
do that.
Well, eventually,
Yeah,
you
over time,
will
You will.
yeah.
not do that.
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe I wanted to already be that.
Well, that
Well,
Um,
that emotional
Connection.
never goes away, but it changes in how it makes you feel.
Mm-hmm.
It
yeah.
could be a
So I'm
week, or
gonna
it could
get
be a
better.
year, or it could be 10 years. When you hear that song,
Mm-hmm.
you'll just have that fond,
You'll think about the good
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
rather than
Yep.
Then
The-
the grief part.
the,
Yep.
the negativity about it, of the reality of it not being here. And
Well, I guess I'm not there yet.
no,
No.
No.
Yeah.
I think it takes time.
yeah.
It does.
I do too.
And it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, thinking about, like you were saying, you were away from your dad, you know, so it's a little different for you, where she had someone that was with her every day, every hour,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, and that's, I think about my dad because, you know, they had been home together for, you know, he retired at 62, so almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And they got to where they went nowhere. So they were just together all the time. So it was really hard for him.
Yeah. Yep.
I
Yeah,
think
he-
that's
He really never got over it.
He did.
I'm sorry, Beth. I didn't-
No, that's fine. This statement, emotion is essential to a person, and to try to repress it is to make one less than a person. That just makes me think of this 18-year-old that went into that grocery store in Buffalo.
Oh,
He didn't know how to express his emotions, I don't guess. You know what
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
saying?
Yeah,
I mean, something
yeah.
inside of him. And so he just decided to go shoot and kill all those people. I mean, so to me, that's almost like if you can't have emotions and feelings like that, then Satan's got a good hold on you,
That's
I
a
think.
yes.
So,
I completely agree. I
So.
completely agree. All right.
And Satan will not miss any opportunity to use that to his advantage.
well,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
And
He's. What is that? Is that green book in here? There's something in Compline. There's a verse we read that says, and he's always looking for someone. He prowls around like a lion constantly, and he's always looking for someone to devour. Yeah, to bottle up grief unnecessarily is to do ourselves harm. We ought to express the grief we feel. Some will be too embarrassed to grieve openly, and they can go off by themselves and let their grief take its natural course in any of a variety of ways. What did you learn as a child about expressing emotion? Did any of you have the same experience I had, or was
I
it
wasn't
different?
supposed to do it.
Yeah.
My grandmother, I grew up with my grandmother, and she was strict.
Hmm.
She was beyond strict, actually.
So if you needed to cry, you had to go in your bedroom, or
You just didn't cry.
Yeah,
You just didn't cry.
didn't do it.
wow. Even girls.
Mm-hmm.
Even girls. Wow. Hmm.
But I think probably when you're thinking of that, you're thinking of like when you're being punished for something, and it's like, I don't want to hear it. You go take care of it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not like in a grief situation.
Yeah.
Because you don't really have that much grief when you're young. You know, I mean,
Right. Yeah.
I think I was in the second grade when my grandfather passed away. And I was, like you said, didn't really know what death was.
Yeah.
Because he was really the first, you know, first one that I'd ever lost that was really close to us.
Hmm.
You know, probably the first time I'd seen my daddy cry,
Hmm.
to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
I lost a brother when I was young, but it was be strong for mom.
Yeah.
It was that kind of a deal.
Mm.
You need to be strong for mom. Go take it. Well, we had younger ones too. Go take care of them and let her, have her time
Right.
and that kind of stuff. So it's a, at that time I guess it was. I wasn't supposed to show my emotions, but it was all right. But I wasn't supposed to as much
Hmm.
or something
Right.
because I was supposed to be taking care of others.
So, have you had the same journey that I've had where over time you realized that was wrong? That what they taught you was not healthy? I mean, I think as a society we've learned that a little better. Perhaps the pendulum has gone too far in the other direction in some cases, but I think we've learned that bottling up our emotions is a bad thing, not just as Christians, but as a Western society. I don't know where I learned that exactly.
Well, that, even with a child, I think most of us taught to excitement and things like that, that you had to tone it down, depending on
Yeah.
where you were. I mean, as far
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
emotions.
My grandfather on my mom's side was the person who taught me that children are to be seen, not heard.
Oh, yeah, I heard that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty old school. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm probably on the tail end of that part of our culture, but I know that was prevalent for a long, long time. Yeah.
But everybody deals with it differently, though.
Yeah.
You know, because like if you're the shy person that really don't express your emotions no matter what, and then you may have somebody just completely different that is just the outspoken person that expresses everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Everybody's so different.
Right. Right.
So I don't, when I say it's where it says, what did you learn as a child about expressing emotion? Sometimes it's not really what you're taught, it's just the way you feel and the way you deal with things.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, that's part of it. Absolutely.
And this is just asking about emotion. It doesn't necessarily say grief emotion. So,
Right.
I grew up in a family where, I never saw my parents really yell at each other. You know what I'm saying? I mean, argue very loud, and of course, nothing physical ever. You knew if there was a problem,
Right.
and they would handle it or whatever. But, and I think that as a child, that helps you develop how you will handle situations that come up.
Right.
You
Definitely.
know.
Definitely.
Then you have some people you hear, they hit each other.
constant.
They're just literally slapping each other all the time. It's just, that's hard sometimes for me to fathom that people can act like that and,
Oh, but they can.
break dishes.
But I grew up
throw
in
things.
that, what you were just saying. But I'm not like that. John and I weren't like that.
Right,
And,
right.
so you can
Right,
change.
you can- oh,
But,
sure,
I think
sure.
what helped me really not be like my family is the fact that I think when I must have been 12 when I started going to church, and they started teaching you about Jesus loving you. Well, then I knew somebody loved me. And so that changed me then as I grew up.
Grew up.
Mm.
Yeah. I know there's
So there are
people that are, oh yeah, sure. I know it can go both ways.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I mean, there's plenty of parents who raise 2 children and they can be totally different in
Yes.
their emotional
And you're
status and everything
Yes.
and how they can handle.
I just thank
Life.
God I'm
Yeah.
not like them.
Yeah. So who are the people who help you express your feelings now?
My family.
Yeah.
Family,
The ones who love you.
friends.
The ones who love you. Amen, sister.
That's right. That's a good.
So as we go through this book, you're probably going to hear me mention CPE a few times. Clinical pastoral education. It's something every seminarian has to go through. Typically after your first year of academics. And most students do it at a hospital. And it's an 11-week program, and they make you a chaplain. And basically, you just walk around and minister to people in the hospital. I was assigned to a nursing home, which was it was like Trinity Village. It was an old Lutheran home. I had the retired national bishop, the last one from the LCA, Jim Crumley. He was, and I had to, and they would have worship service, and I had to preach in front of him, and I hadn't even had preaching class yet. The former bishop of South Carolina, a couple of retired seminary professors. Yeah. They were really good to me, though. It was intimidating, but it was good. But the big part about CPE, though, was not about, we weren't just workers to go and minister to people. It was about us. It was about, for me, it was about me. And what would happen if I walked into a room and here's a family grieving something or dealing with something that really hits home for me, and how do I handle it, right? If it was somebody that had the same diagnosis that my dad died of or whatever, and all of a sudden, how do I as the pastor handle that so that all of a sudden it doesn't turn into the family ministering to me? You see what I mean? That was a number one goal of this program. So needless to say, I faced a lot of different situations, especially with the dementia ward. But there were a lot of times where, I relied on my military training to bottle things up for a couple of hours so I could then go to the gym and work it out on the weight set or the treadmill or something. And I had to think really hard about who I expressed my feelings around and who would help me. Because I never thought about somebody helping me express my emotions. But there was a story, and we had several books we had to read that summer, and there was one story that just has always stuck with me. Of everything we read, this one story just really got me. There was a woman who had just lost her husband, and the person telling the story was the hospital chaplain. And he was, the medical staff came and got him, hey, this woman's husband just died, she's really grieving. Could you, she's talked to her church, and her priest is on the way, but he's not here yet, and she could just use some support. So he goes and sits down with her, and she is just angry at God. Just angry. And she's letting him have it. And he's like, I understand, okay, and he's guiding her through it, and he's letting her, and she just tears and sobbing, and so and I don't remember how long this scene went on, probably 20-30 minutes or something. And she kind of stops and she's taking a breath, and her priest comes in, and she cleans herself up and sits up straight. Oh, hi, Father, how are you? Thank you for coming. She could be emotional with a complete stranger. But her own priest, she had to put on her Sunday best and be prim and proper. That has always bothered me. Like this, and I don't even fault the priest, and I don't know that I really fault her. It's that cultural thing, that who do we trust to help us express our emotions? And I don't necessarily know that it has to be your own pastor, but I would hope that as Christians we have some kind of a spiritual leader that we can look to. I would say for younger people it should be maybe an elder in the church. I don't mean some people call it church council elders. That's not what I mean. Somebody in their 40s look to somebody in their 70s or 80s that has been through a lot more and can share their faith and their experience with them.
So which one of those attitudes of hers was the right one? Which one was she really? You know what I'm saying?
I don't think she was being true to herself either way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well, I think the tantrum, the anger and all that, I think that was just letting out what was naturally there.
Okay.
I think she was getting that out, but and he didn't address it in the story. I wonder if he was there at the right time to let her open up that pressure valve and blow off that steam.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
I think that has to be part of it.
Okay.
But he was left with the impression that she didn't feel comfortable being that vulnerable, that emotional with her priest.
Okay.
And he, as soon as the priest came in, he left. So he didn't know the priest from Adam. There's no like, oh, I know this guy and he's really arrogant and whatever. There was none of that. It was like, for whatever reason, she felt that she couldn't have shown that emotion with that priest. Which then begs the question, how is her faith going to answer that problem that she has, that she's now angry with God? That's a problem.
Isn't that a step of grieving, though?
Yeah.
To be angry
Yes, it is.
at some point?
Yeah.
Yeah, Beth, you talked about that the last time,
Yeah.
and I've thought about that, and I never blamed God, but I've been angry with John since then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope you all don't mind me drawing on my own experience. In 2016, Wendy's brother was killed in a car accident. It's probably the worst day I can remember. I had just finished internship. I was starting my senior year at seminary, and Wendy was devastated. Absolutely devastated. So I called my pastor, who I had just worked for the previous year on internship, because death and funerals were something that he just really had a gift for ministry in that setting. He really, really did. And I called him. I said, John, I don't know what you're doing, but I need you. He dropped what he was doing and came to our house and just was there. And one thing he said that, of the different things I didn't necessarily agree with John theologically, because he's fairly liberal on a lot of stuff. You will hear me say this again, because I believe it to the core of my being. He looked, because somebody asked the question, why? All of us are going, when we have a loss, we're all going to say at some point, we're going to say why. And I think not being able to answer that question sometimes can be a source of that anger, or can drive that anger. And what John said in the next sentence is one of the most profound things I think I've ever heard. He said, God's plan is always for life. Now think about that. God's plan is always for life. Now, if you just went through the Revelation Bible study, we know that's God's ultimate plan, is that we will all have life with Him. So when someone says, well, I don't know why God decided to take her, or, that statement flies in the face of such a claim. Because with Job, for instance, when I think of suffering, my brain goes to Job. God always stopped Satan short of killing Job. He wouldn't let him take his life. He took pretty much everything else, but he wouldn't let him take his life. I don't know that I can answer every question about. There are some times when you'll go, well, if God's plan is always for life, then how does this work? Yeah. This is a really tough theological area to navigate, and I'm still working on it. But I keep coming back to that. God's plan is always for life. So I guess all I'm trying to leave you with there is, if you ever feel compelled to say God took someone, I'm probably going to come back at you with that. Okay? Or if you hear someone say that, I would encourage you to share that sentiment with them. God's plan is always for life. And I think when we think about where our hope is, when I'm addressing a grieving family in the funeral sermon, that's where I always steer them, right? I always try to remind people, what do we have to look forward to? This is not the end. We have life in our future. We have life coming to all of us who believe and trust in Him.
I sometimes wonder, though, why you have to suffer before then. I mean, I guess it's just natural for me to see how Jenny suffered. When she's such a faithful girl.
I'm going to be honest, Priscilla. I'm wrestling with that myself, because I'm reading a lot of stuff in Paul's letters right now where he rejoices in his suffering. I can't wrap my head around that.
I think I can understand that.
Yeah.
With all her suffering that she's doing, I don't know how to explain it. She's still loving God. I mean, she's suffering, but she's still loving the Lord. I mean, maybe that's...
She knows where her hope is.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's hard to see her suffer. Well, I'm sorry to get on that
No,
subject.
But I think that's how we feel about anybody. Like you were saying with yours, to see the people suffer, you're going through the grief process ahead of time because you know
Where it's going to end up.
you want them here, but
Yeah.
you want them not to suffer. But you
Yeah.
want, you want it all, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
basically you do. You want.
One of the harder discussions we had in my ethics class was talking about euthanasia. I mean, Beth, how many pets have you put down or helped put down in the last month?
Last month.
Or this week? How many this week?
There were 3 last week, I know for sure.
And we always think of that as the, what's the word we use? It's humane,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to let them suffer anymore. We don't want to see them in pain. We talked about that in the ethics class, and the professor was like, we don't end a life just to end suffering. From the Christian perspective. I think that's his opinion. I don't think that's hard and fast rule, and I'm studying that a little more myself. The prayer request I had on Sunday for Wendy's friend Smokey, they let him go, and he died just before 2:00. yesterday. So, but they didn't end his life. They just stopped prolonging it. So there's a difference there. You know, that's very different from Jack Kevorkian, you know, coming to your house with a syringe and a tank of gas, you know. Yeah, I there are some people whose suffering is just, you know, that's so hard. It's so hard. And I don't know that I really understand how Paul could rejoice in his suffering. I don't quite get that. That probably means my faith is a lot less than Paul's, which, wow, shocker. But it's something, this is part of my own faith journey that I need to learn more about that, I guess. But as we see someone we care about suffering, I guess the best thing we can do is just be with them. Just be with them and just share whatever you can with them, you know? And that's not always easy. It's probably easier for someone who, like she does, is sound in her faith and her hope and you know, and she's positive about the whole thing, even though she knows.
I can't imagine anybody like she's handling it. I can't.
Yeah.
But yet she has these terrible days.
Yeah.
That are awful. She's mostly
But like you, yeah,
smiling.
is this not the same person who, when I was on the phone the day
No,
John died?
that's Kelly.
Oh, that was Kelly. Okay.
Yeah, this
but,
is Jenny.
But Kelly is there,
Yeah.
and I think you all heard me say this. You know that
Kelly's
when they-
something else.
they call Pastor, don't worry. Priscilla is surrounded by people who love Jesus. I will never forget that. I will never forget. But what a great thing, you know. What
and
a great
she
thing.
does.
you know.
Well, they all do.
They all do. I know,
Yeah,
I know.
it's just great. It really is.
Well, I'm sure it's hard as a parent
You're the
Yeah.
mom.
to see your
just-
child.
Yeah.
You know,
It is.
anytime your children. I mean, when they were tiny little kids, toddlers, and they'd fall and scrape their knee, it hurt. So yeah, it goes on even when they're adults.
That's right.
You don't want to see
I know.
them hurt.
No.
But
So-
she does help us with her attitude.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah,
It's just,
yeah.
okay.
Now,
Well, you were talking about Paul, I don't even know where I saw this, or I think it was in a devotion. The part, I can't remember, where he talks about he's learned to be content, where he has more, or he has less. And they were talking in the devotion about how many times that you've read that, or how many times that you hear that. And they said, all of a sudden, the word learn came out. He didn't do it automatically. He learned out
How
of
to-
all those things that happened to him that were good and
Mm.
bad, that to all of a sudden, when they were reading it, learn came out to
Right.
them that, you know, here he
to
was,
be content.
where he was up high as far as he was a Pharisee and high and a Jew and all these things, and then down to he was killing women, which he thought was good, and then he finds out it's bad and can't see, and you know, all the different things. But you know, and when I was sitting, I was going, wow, learned, you know, they
Yeah.
learned it, you know. Most of the time we focus on the content or whatever else, but.
Okay, so that puts us at 8 o'clock or a little bit before. I think, well, let's plan to do 3 and 4 next time. So next time will be May 23rd. We don't have any conflicts, do we? All right, so I think we can cover 3 and 4. And I think they probably aren't that unrelated, because that's depression and loneliness and physical symptoms of distress. So let's see if we can cover both of those chapters next time. And if we only get through one, that's okay. But that's what we'll try. Any Any last minute thoughts or anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to?
Talking about weeping in the Bible.
Mm.
Peter's denial.
Mm. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Peter replied, "Man, I did not know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed, the Lord turned and looked straight at
Oof.
Peter. Then Peter remembered the words that he, as before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly.
Mhm.
That could be grief. It could be
Shame.
shame, disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you don't hear about him anymore. He's not at the cross. He's not, if he is, he's not mentioned that he's there.
Yeah.
They mention John, but they don't mention,
Peter.
not just him, but I mean, anyone else either.
And
Yeah.
Peter was the rock.
Yeah. And then he's so upset, what you had the other Sunday when Jesus said, do you love me?
Yeah.
You know everything. Why are you asking? He's sitting there saying, why are
Jesus,
you
please don't
asking?
ask me this. Oh, yeah,
Well, and in front of everybody else, he didn't ask anybody else.
yeah.
He didn't say anything to anybody else. He didn't say anything to Thomas, who had the doubts, or anybody else who ran away or wasn't there. Just him.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Hmm. All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time. Thank you for all the good discussion we've had tonight, the good reflection, the openness, and the sharing of experiences and thoughts and feelings that all of us have gone through at some point. Please use this study that we're doing to help us grow in our faith and in our understanding. Help us to use this, what we're gaining in this study, to help those around us and the rest of our church family and others in our circles who are coping with grief or maybe don't know how to cope with grief. Let us be their guide and their coach, and help us to be the support that they need in their time of distress. Please watch over us now as we go home tonight. Keep us safe in our travels until we can gather again in your name. And we pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks y'all very much. All right. Moved my bookmark so I know where we're going to be next time.
Do I have one? I've got several.